Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca,
I'm Clerona.
and we're discussing chapter 3 of the Ministry of Healing. The title of this chapter is With Nature and with God. Why don't you start off and tell me what you found interesting?
Yeah, so this was towards like the end, and basically, sorry. It says, when Jesus said to his disciples that the harvest is great and the laborers are few, he did not urge upon them the necessity of ceaseless toil, but bade them, pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest that he will send forth laborers into his harvest. Basically, God is saying there's so much work that needs to be done, and there's not enough people out there willing to spread the gospel, right? But God didn't tell them to, you need to work 10 times harder. Mm-hmm. He said, pray that God will send more people. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at this through like the realms of like mental health. Mm-hmm. And I think like sometimes like ministering is so important, and sometimes we take it upon ourselves that we need to minister constantly. And some people get they get burnt out, Mm-hmm. But I feel like for us, it's important to take the time to rejuvenate ourselves so we don't get burnt out, but also pray that God impresses more people to take upon this work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like what you've talked about rejuvenating, I think that's kind of what it talks about over and over in this chapter. Yes. Because it's talking about how Jesus would often find himself in secluded places, searching the scripture, and it was all of the time it was in nature.
Yes.
And for me, like, that was just kind of an important reminder. I think many times, like, we can get carried away with our daily tasks or even like ministering and serving, that we forget that we also need to be fed.
Exactly.
And I think nature is like such a tool that God's given to us to just step away from all of the noise and have a moment with him.
Yeah.
And I just thought, it was interesting that it talks about, it also says, with songs of thanksgiving, he cheered his hours of labor and brought heaven's gladness to the toil-worn and disheartened. So not only was he praying and searching the scriptures like every day, every morning, but he would also sing, and that was a way that he could uplift other people around him. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and I think it says some point here, it says when he returned from his hours of prayer after the toilsome day, there marked a look of peace upon his face, the freshness of life and power that seemed to pervade his whole being. So not was he mentally rejuvenated, but people could see the physical effects of his connection with his father.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, is important.
And that's what he got from spending time with his father in nature.
Yeah.
I think that's really calming. Another thing I thought was interesting was, it says, as men should lift their eyes to the hills of God and behold the wonderful works of his hand, they can learn precious lessons of divine truth. And if you think about it, if you go into nature, into a forest, into the mountains, seeing flowers, if you just stop to notice these things around us, we can learn so much about the Creator. And I think that's just really important for us, that God can speak through nature and teach us more about who he is.
Yeah.
I think
nice. It's also taking the time to disconnect, because I know for me sometimes after a long day, how I try to rejuvenate is I would just scroll mindlessly on TikTok, but it's disconnecting from that, but connect to something else that can actually rejuvenate. So instead of just scrolling mindlessly, put your phone away, go for a walk, or listen to Christian music while you're out in nature, do something else to rejuvenate your soul.
Like you said, you put away those things that fill your life with a lot of noise, and you plug into something that's actually
exactly that's
your
exact
soul.
Words I was looking for. Yes.
That's the thing, because you don't get anything from scrolling.
No,
it doesn't feed you in any way.
No.
But the lesson here is if you go into nature, God can use that to feed you.
Yes.
And we're only going to discover that if we actually do it.
Exactly.
And we have to set aside those distractions.
Yeah.
I think the last thing that I would just highlight was closer to the end. It says, all who are under the training of God need the quiet hour for communion with their own hearts, with nature, and with God. In them is to be revealed a life that is not in harmony with the world, its customs, or its practices, and they need to have a personal experience in obtaining a knowledge of the will of God. We must individually hear him speaking to the heart. Once again, like, it just goes back to that. It's something individual. It's something each of us is going to have our own personal journey. And it's important that it says everyone who's under the training of God needs the quiet hours of communion for yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
And also, that's the way that your life can be changed so that you're living differently from the world.
Yes.
And so other people can see you and they see that you have different customs and practices.
Yeah.
That was also really interesting.
Yeah, and if you read on, it says, when every other voice is hushed, and in the quietness we wait for him, the silence of the soul makes more distinct the voice of God. So it's really silence, because even in like the previous chapter before, it's like in the stillness, that's where God speaks.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point to end on.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us, and we will see you in chapter 4.
Bye.